This video is sponsored by Squarespace. What's going on, guys? Vincent here from thecreativedojo.net. Welcome to the video tutorial. Today we're talking Trapcode Mir, Trapcode sound keys, audio reacting expressions, and a lot of other cool things in After Effects. Some very popular topics in motion design and on YouTube. So I follow a person called Digital Punk GFX or Graphics, and basically this person creates some really awesome VJ loops and audio reacting animations. And I ran into one of his Trapcode Mir experiments here where he drives geometry using audio. So as you can see, just kind of moving things along, moving things using audio, changing the complexity and geometry and flow of everything using Trapcode Mir. He used a tool called Frequency React, but I think that more people have sound keys. And so I'm going to show you guys how to do that in sound keys. Basic rundown. I created kind of like my own version of it. I didn't want to copy it exactly, but this is kind of just how you drive stuff using audio. So as you can see, we're kind of moving, animating geometry in Trapcode Mir using some audio. And so if you don't have sound keys, you don't actually need sound keys. Basically, you just need some sort of software to pretty much isolate and analyze your audio and isolate the frequencies that you want to use to drive your animation. So a lot of times we want to use our bass kicks, our hi-hats, vocals, stuff like that to drive things. And so if you can find a way to do that using software like Adobe Audition, free stuff like Audacity, a lot of softwares can isolate frequencies that you want to use, and you want to export those into an audio file, bring it into After Effects, convert them to keyframes, and then manipulate those keyframes from there. But if you want to stay in After Effects, the best way to do that is using Trapcode Sound Keys, which is a paid plugin from Red Giant here. So let's go and take a look at how to kind of do that in After Effects here. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new solid, and I'm going to go ahead and call this Sound Keys. And basically, I'm going to apply sound keys to this solid right here. I also have my audio layer that I imported, dragged it into the composition here, and some background layer. And so basically in sound keys, if I'm going a little fast, feel free to pause and rewatch certain parts. I don't want to spend too much time on the basic setup here. But I'm going to select my audio layer, which is this track right here. Links will be in the video description down below. So basically sound keys will visualize your audio. And if I just scrub through this, you're going to see that you can kind of see the kicks, right? The base of my audio track. So like right here would be kind of like a kick right here. And so sound keys will give you three groups to work with, right? So group one, which is range one, I'm going to select it, make sure it's active. And you can play around with the corners right here, these properties right here. I'm just going to drag it in the interface. So I'm going to isolate just that kick, which is probably like right here. These frequencies right here are my kicks. So you got to memorize that. Range one are my bass kicks, right? And so the type, right, you can either on and off trigger the properties or use the peak of the range, or I like to do average of range here. And output, basically the whole idea of sound keys is that it's going to convert audio to actual numbers. Right here, the output is 0. It's going to either output it from 0 to 100, 0 to 1, -1 to 1, 0 to 360, whatever you want. I tend to like to output numbers from 0 to 1 just because it makes more sense to me. And so basically, we're going to use output to drive stuff right here. And the way Trapcode Mir works is if you want to animate stuff like flow or, evolution, those numbers have to always increase for things to start moving properly. So you don't want your flow to be fluctuating like up and down, 100 to 120 to 70 to 150 to 40. You don't want it to fluctuate up and down like that. You want it to continuously get larger and larger and larger. And the rate at which you increase will depend on the amplitude of the track. And how you do that is you change the fall off from instant to none, integrate. And this is going to cause our output to always increase and increase at a rate that's relative to our spectrum right here. And so I'm going to go to range 2, activate that as well. And now I want to use maybe like the mids or the highs, right? Like, my highs are doing some funny business right over here, so we can isolate that right there. and just isolate this. And you can kind of watch, this is range 1, this is range 2. You can kind of watch to see if you're actually capturing it right. So if I go ahead and do a RAM preview, you can see that we're capturing our bass pretty accurately. This actually peaks right when the bass kicks and stuff like that. And so you kind of get that isolation right here that you can kind of visualize right here. And same thing, I want it the fall off to be integrate and output from 0 to 1. And this is just personal preference. I'm gonna go ahead and activate range 3. And for range 3, I'm also gonna isolate the same bass, but it's not to be redundant here because for this one, I want to keep the fall off to instant and the output to 0 to 1. So basically we have two bass, one that will always increase and get larger and larger and larger because it's set to no fall off. And the bass range 3 does have a fall off, and it's going to fluctuate depending on the amplitude. So it can get larger, smaller, larger and smaller, depending on the amplitude of the track of the bass. Whereas the other one just gets larger and larger and larger and larger. And so now that we have the setup done, you need to go ahead and hit the apply button right here. And what that's going to do is that if you hit UU on the keyboard, you're going to see that we have output 1, output 2, output 3. And these are all the keyframes right over here. And as you can see, output 3 will always go from 0 to 1, and it fluctuates up and down depending on our bass frequency amplitude right here. And then output 1 and output 2 are also increasing, but they're increasing and they're always increasing. They're never going down. And the rate at which they change depends on how hard the amplitude is or how high the amplitude is in that range. And so now that we have that set up, we don't need to show sound keys anymore. We just need the data right here to drive our animations here. Let's go ahead and hop into a new solid, create a new solid. We'll call this Mir, and we'll apply Trapcode Mir. And let's go ahead and get a basic setup going here. I'm not going to focus too much on the look right now. I'm going to unlink these and increase the size a little bit. Increase the number of vertices for more detail. And let's go ahead and just kind of get a basic shape just so I can kind of show you what's going on. And whenever I play with Trapcode Mir and Trapcode Tau, I don't really know what I'm doing, to be honest. Like, I'm just kind of experimenting with looks and playing around with things to create some pretty interesting stuff here. So I know that I like the multi-smooth ridge kind of fractal here. And I'm gonna go into shader here and change the shader from density. I don't want this density look. I believe in the original demonstration, he did use some sort of density look, but I kind of want a flat, solid geometry look. So not a kind of a clear through fractal look. And I'm gonna change the blending mode from add to normal. And so I want a solid piece of geometry. And whenever you're working with Trapcode Mir or Trapcode Tau or whatever, you want to use lights. You always want to use lights with some kind of shadow. We'll make it kind of like a blue light, point light, hit OK. And I want to position this kind of like, somewhere where I get some nice highlights like that. Something like that. That's cool. We'll also create another light. So we'll hit Control Command D, duplicate it. We'll bring it somewhere else just to kind of fill in the rest of the stuff here. Maybe like that. And we'll hit AA and maybe decrease the intensity. Maybe change it from a different blue to like a lighter blue. And maybe we'll go ahead and add one more ambient light just to kind of fill everything in. Hit AA, and this would be like, 20 or something. Just to kind of fill it in. It looks kind of gross right now, but we'll focus on the look a little bit later. So I'm gonna go ahead and let's see here. Decrease the frequency down a little bit. And maybe decrease the amplitude. Just so we have something subtle, just like this, and so that we can have something to work with. And I might just maybe bend it a little bit. And we'll go ahead and increase the complexity so we have a little bit more detail in our fractal. So cool, something like this. And so now how do we drive this using our data right here? So we can do that by some simple expressions here, some which you already may know. And so I'm going to bring sound keys up right here. And so we're going to, use these outputs here. So for an example, in the demonstration, he probably used either an offset X, Y, Z or scroll X. And as you can see, when we animate scroll X, it needs to always be increasing, right? And we want to increase at a rate similar to our audio. And so I'm going to go ahead and hit Alt or Option on the keyboard and hit the stopwatch for scroll X right here, an expression. And we're going to start with a multiplier. So like, let's just say like 50 or so, asterisk or times, and pick whip to our bass in sound keys. So in this case, our bass is output 1. And go ahead and click away. And as you can see, it's going to take the output data from our audio track, multiply it by 50. And 50 is just some arbitrary number that I picked based on the speed that I want. And if I go ahead and hit RAM preview, you can see that it's animating the scroll X at a rate that's similar to our amplitude multiplied by like a 50. So I'm gonna change it to 75 just to make it a little bit more intense, a little bit faster. So now our track is controlled by the audio. It's flowing to the right based on the audio here. And so if you wanted to change directions, you can get fancy with your math, your expression, and clamp things and turn things on. For scroll Y, if you want to scroll up, you need a negative number. So I'm gonna do like negative like 40 times, and then pick whip to, our high range right here. Our high range was output 2, and so now it's going to flow upwards depending on what the high ranges are doing that we isolated here. So that's cool. Now, amplitude is a different story, right? Amplitude, we don't want amplitude to get larger and larger and larger and larger. You're gonna get some nasty geometry like that. What you want the amplitude to do is fluctuate up and down based on the audio track, right? And so we have that in output 3. And so what we want to do is for amplitude, go ahead and you can kind of see what we're doing here. I kind of like a base standard of like 28 is a normal amplitude for this look here. And so actually maybe like 20, 22 or something. So let's gonna go ahead and hit a stopwatch, hit Alt or Option and click on the stopwatch. And this time we're gonna type a really, really cool expression here, and it's called ease, right? And it takes a current value, and it's gonna take a min max. It's going to take our value min and value max. And I typed this just to kind of show you what's going on. So ease is going to pretty much remap our ranges right here. So right, our output here has a range from 0 to 1, right? Now, we don't want a 0 to 1 range for amplitude. That's too small. So we can remap it right here. So ease is going to take our first property here. So what is the value that we're looking at? And the value that we're looking at here is output 3, right? So just pick whip to output 3. Now do a comma. The next value is the minimum of value 3 here. So our minimum we know for sure is from 0 and our max is 1. And then now it's asking us, all right, so now that you have a range from 0 to 1 and we're looking at output 3, what do you want to remap things to? And so in this case, I want our minimum amplitude to be like, I don't know, like 10, and our value maximum to be like maximum of like 30. And so what this is doing, and this is a little bit confusing, but hey, it's saying, look at output 3 right here. The minimum is 0 and the maximum is 1. So translate that, convert that. So instead of 0 and 1, you're getting 10 to 30. And this is similar to the linear expression, except ease makes it a little bit softer and more easing to it. And so now what you're going to notice is that the amplitude also spikes whenever the bass hits, right? So let's go ahead and do a RAM preview. That's pretty much the general idea of it, right? So you can use this to map things to like the vertices, the size, bending, evolution, the frequency even, amplitude, complexities. Like you can pretty much use this data here and either pick whip it and be direct, or you can remap the ranges using expressions like linear or ease like we just did, and remap things and control it and control a lot of things here. Before I make this thing look a little bit prettier, I want to thank our sponsors over at Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Squarespace is the only platform to make an amazing website, whether it's for a store, online business, or portfolio. They have amazing themes to choose from, fully customizable to make it the way you want it to look like without having any coding knowledge required. They have awesome 24-hour support, and best of all, if you use the promo code DOJO at checkout, you can actually save 10% off your order and support the show. So check it out over at squarespace.com/dojo. Squarespace, the number one place to create an amazing website. So now that we have Trapcode Mir kind of all set up and rigged, we can go ahead and play around with it. It's all experimental. Again, I can never reduplicate whatever I created. You just got to play around with it, add your own tweak to it. But I will say, if you want to create some awesome looks, play around with the draw, right? So we can do like a wireframe look, or like a front wire back cull, or a front fill back cull, or a front fill back wire, or just do like a point kind of setup here. If you're not a fan of the whole smooth geometry look, you can go for a flat or like a more dense look here, and then change the blending mode from like add or super add, and create some pretty cool stuff like this. I kind of like the smooth and, maybe like a front fill back wire or what have you. Pretty cool stuff. You can like add ambient occlusion in there and add a second pass, like a wireframe pass on top, and then change the line size to like 0.2 and do some pretty cool stuff that way here. But, pretty cool stuff here. Under rendering, I like to up the samples and stuff like that at the very end. We can go to materials here, and in Mir 3 they have a lot more material options here, so you can like nudge the colors a little bit, give it a custom tint. You can define the opacity as well as the ambient like that. Maybe change the diffuse down if you're not happy with that. Increase the specular if you wanted to, shininess. Add some metal aspects to it, add some reflection right here. It's pretty cool. And you can also change the reflection and lighting map right here. So you can define a custom map, or do like industrial, or whatever, change it to like church interior, and get different shades, different lightings, different colors going on. So that's kind of the cool part of Mir here. You can just play around endlessly and have a play with it. I still want to like play around with the geometry a little bit, maybe like a spiral. So I'm gonna go ahead and start some basic color correction, right? So I'm gonna apply curves to probably Trapcode Mir, as well as the background here. And I'm gonna go ahead and go to Mir here, and let's definitely bring this down. Increase the shadows just slightly at the low end, and maybe add some contrast here. And I'm gonna go into the background and maybe darken this a little too. And so we have something like that. And now in the original demonstration that I created, as well as he created, he used deep glow. I like a premium glow called Optical Glow by Red Giant as well. Of course, you can use the default glow and stack them. But I applied a deep glow or optical glow, and we'll put that underneath our curves here. And the problem with optical glow is you need to define an alpha channel. So I'm gonna hit generate unmult. And so I'm gonna go ahead and isolate the threshold and just isolate the highlights right around here or so. And I'm gonna go ahead and increase the size a little bit. And just something like that, have some fun. And then probably like a tint as well. Whenever you add contrast like that, you're always gonna wanna kind of like readjust it, because it'll be oversaturated. And also in the original demonstration that he created on Instagram, he added like a CC force motion blur. I'm not really a fan of that effect. It's a little too sluggish. I'm gonna create a new adjustment layer here, bring it down, put sound keys at the bottom here. We don't need to see it. For motion blur, I like to use Pixel motion blur under time. If you want to use like real smart motion blur, you can too. increase the samples to like 10 because we want more detail. And that's really going to make the kind of the impact movement a lot more forceful and stronger. So when it kind of jerks, you're really going to see the jerk. It's going to really emphasize that. You can also apply a camera and animate the camera zoom to the audio as well as what I did in the original demonstration here. And we'll go ahead and create another global adjustment layer. We'll call this CC for color correction. I used a chromatic aberration from Red Giant Universe, but I won't show you guys that in this one because it's kind of just redundant here. But yeah, so you can play around with the curves, color correct, create some pretty cool looks here. And before you render, go ahead and go back to Mir and go ahead and up those samples right here into rendering. So we'll increase the multi-sample to like 12 and enable super sampling. And that will kind of get rid of the weird aliasing artifacts that you kind of see here. You can add depth of field, you can add a lot of other different things here, but this is pretty much it. I'm gonna do a last quick RAM preview. So that's pretty much the general idea. If you want to get fancy and change the direction of things, you can do that using expressions and just manipulating certain values, clamping things, and just triggering things and create some pretty cool stuff here. Add some cool camera movements and depth of field shifts and shakes and all these other cool things here. But this is basically kind of how you integrate sound keys with Trapcode Mir. Just something to think about, something for you to try and experiment in your own. My name is Vincent Wynn from the Creative Dojo, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.